Low, I
It
didn't
is
realize
7
that.
o'clock by
Yeah.
my cell phone.
Me muted.
Don't you hate doing these?
Good evening. Tonight is Thursday, March 24th, 2022. It is 7:01 p.m. and we are in the Bellotta meeting room of Lunenburg Town Hall. This is a meeting of the Lunenburg Finance Committee. I will read the preamble and then we will get started. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that wish to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please join the Zoom app, or from a telephone, dial toll-free 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 792-737-0353. Please note the available Zoom option, broadcast, and recordings are for the convenience of the public. If any technical difficulties were to occur, the meeting will continue. If you wish to participate, please come to Town Hall and you can participate here. This agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. I hereby call this meeting to order. Members present are myself, Peter Beardmore, Mr. Baelish, Mr. Waters, Mr. Passios, and Mr. Gray. Mr. Simeone is joining us remotely, and Mr. Menard has reached out to tell me that he will not be available this evening. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any announcements from the board? Nope. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, chair's report. I apologize to everybody for the ridiculous amounts of email that I have passed you over the course of the last several days. Tonight, you should have received presentations from PAC and Sewer, and we have an update on the draft warrant, which the town manager will go through this evening as part of the other moneyed articles and warrant update presentation. I do not have a presentation from the Board of Health. That will be basically a verbal presentation. And that's about it for tonight. I did receive from Jay, and I'm just going to talk about this briefly, and then we really don't need to discuss it in detail unless there's a need to, on the warrant letter. I did receive an update or some rewording and some edits from Jay on the warrant letter, which I will add to the version that I've been working off of, which now includes a new paragraph, which I'll read in tonight. Net is, if you have additional comment, I will send an update probably in the next 24 hours of everything that I have. And then if you have additional comments, please send them back to me sometime prior to next week's meeting. And that's really it for administrative matters tonight. With that, good timing. Town Manager and Finance Director report.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
Just an update or updates that I gave at the Select Board's meeting on Tuesday. The tax lien sale occurred, and you heard this last night from the Finance Director as well. But for a breakdown of from the beginning of the process to the end. So the auction was held on the 17th, and at the beginning of the tax sale lien process, when we first started, the tax collector had 50 properties with back taxes totaling $1,058,077. The tax collector collected $313,312 against 26 of the properties. 7 properties entered into payment agreements. 10 properties will be moved to foreclosure. And 7 tax liens were purchased by tallage, totaling $50,728. There were 4 properties that were identified by the Select Board to remove from that process. Only 3 of them are moving forward because one of them paid their back taxes, the 101 Pleasant Street property.
Excuse me,
Sure.
the property's moving to foreclosure. Did the Select Board act on that, or is that just sort of an automatic next step, or how does that work?
Those other properties, that's an automatic, yeah.
So once it goes past,
They
if
they
nobody
move-
buys the lien, the town moves it
Yeah,
to
they move
foreclosure.
through the process.
Okay, understood.
And other updates, the town received a asset management grant for stormwater. That grant is in the amount of $128,005, of which $76,605 is funding through the DEP's state revolving fund, and the remainder of $51,400 is a match required from the town. And of that match, $21,900 will be within our year 5, which is fiscal '23 tasks that we need to do under stormwater. So, and the remaining $13,100 will be available within the operating budget. So there's no change to the budget, bottom line, for stormwater. And
What will that money be used for?
the asset management
Yeah.
grant for a complete inventory of all of our stormwater assets. So that's the first step in the process to lay the groundwork for a complete asset management program plan.
So that means like we'll actually know where all of our
Yes.
catch basins are and those kinds of things.
Right, and they've been identified so that they exist in varying formats on a horizontal level, but this will be, in a centralized database.
Great.
So, yeah, and that's all I have for updates.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank
So we had a discussion last night about a spending to date report. I'm assuming we don't have that tonight? Okay, can we have that next week? Is that, okay. Okay, good, I understand. Stuff happens. All right, so next is item 7, which is budget presentations. And our first presentation tonight is from Lunenburg Public Access Cable. I need to find the relevant presentation and share it, so bear with me for a moment. Pack. Share. And we will go full screen. And hopefully this is going to work. It does. It appears to be working.
That looks a lot
So
like it.
as
Thank
you begin to present, they will, your guys in the back there will put that on that screen. So it should be there right now, and we will
That way I'll know where I am,
move
which
forward accordingly.
will be the
Yes.
first time this week.
Okay, good. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Steve Walker. I'm the chair of the Public Access Cable Committee. Joe is with us here by Zoom, who's disappeared off the screen, but Joe's the manager who runs the station. And as we had a prior commitment, couldn't make tonight, so she's joining us by Zoom. She's my backup. If I can't answer the question, Joe knows an awful lot about it. If we could go to the next slide. Oh, it's appearing on the back screen. Okay.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I thought it was going to show up on that screen.
Oh, yeah, and I apologize. You should be seeing full screen here, so bear with me. This is not going according to plan. So,
There it is, all except for, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
yeah, I'm just
Literally.
trying to get this so that I can, maybe we shouldn't have done it this way, but all right, we'll make it work. Share this screen, share.
We can blame me for this confusion.
Now we should have,
I copied the wrong file and brought it here carefully. So.
it's quite all right. We'll make it work. Okay, here we go.
Okay, the preamble. We put this up to make sure people understand some of the consequences of this budget. The PAC revenue is restricted for PAC purposes and does not affect town budgets. In other words, the money comes in, goes into an enterprise fund, and is kept there reserved for use for providing PAC services to the town. The franchise fee from Comcast is the principal source. So virtually all our money comes from a franchise fee from Comcast. This gets negotiated every 10 years or so. Was done, I think, about 4 years ago. And part of that is capital, but mainly it's a fee for using the rights of way through the town to provide services for cable. We also receive interest monthly from the funds which we are holding reserved for the new studio when we manage to put all of that together, which would be good. So the next slide, what I did here is try to come up with a sensible estimate. It's the Comcast, that's the one. A sensible estimate of income. One of the problems, well, there are multiple problems, one of which is people talk a lot about cable cutting. What happens if somebody is getting video services via internet streaming? That does not show up in the revenue that comes to us. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that right at the end. So I took the last few quarters, which are on this slide, took the fees, the actual fees that we received, and the last column, so I finally discovered how to color slides in a spreadsheet. Green ones are where it actually went up quarter over quarter. The interesting one here, if you look at the fee for August of 2019, the top one, and look at the fee for February of 22, they're almost the same number. One of the issues is when you try and work out what cable cutting is really doing so that we can do our best to predict what's going to happen, there are a lot of issues that impact it, one of which is growth of the town, one of which is demographics of the town, the employment situation in the town, and of course COVID confused everything. A lot of people were staying at home, a lot of kids were staying at home. You'll see the worst line, it went down almost 3%, and the best line, it went up just over 4%, quarter over quarter. So what I've done is, on the next slide, you'll see the anticipated income for financial year 23. And that shows Comcast at $197,857 approximately. What I did there is I took the 3 payments we've had in this financial year and prorated them out, assuming the next one is essentially the same, and taken that as the likely number. Given the history of the numbers I just showed you, it seems to be a pretty reasonable number to use at this point. The interest, which has gone down. It used to be higher than this, of 2,400 or so, which gives us a total, the nice, easy to remember number, because we'll come back to this, of a little over 200,000. So our target is to make sure our operations expenses do not exceed that number. The next one, my apologies for the size of the font, but either that or I'm getting older and can't read it as well. But this is the detail of it. Is it readable from the... Do you have hard copies or not? Oh, you've got them on your computers. Excellent. This has not changed significantly except in the way some of it has had to be put together. So the top three lines with numbers, it shows PEG access salaries. The third line shows a production technician. We don't have that person on board yet. In fact, we're right in the middle of trying to put that together and get it advertised. We're trying to make sure they come on before the end of the year. We would have tried to do it a while back, but with COVID happening and meetings getting confused and things, it didn't make any sense to bring him or her on at that time. The change is the one labeled videographers. We used to have those as consultants. They were paid and the IRS paperwork was a 1099, and now they are unbenefited part-time employees. So they were all changed over to that. So now it shows up in our salaries. So the next line from those three down, the 113,000, is our salaries. The numbers below those, I'm happy to go through one at a time if you want to, but all of them except the 30,000 near the bottom, which is capital, if you add them up, come somewhere around 20,000. And then the very bottom line is also an operational expense, which is the indirect costs. So it's things like health benefits and the various other fees that get paid to benefited employees. The 30,000 we treat separately because that's capital, and that can come directly from our fund. Right now, we're doing what we can to preserve that capital. If we're putting new equipment into our present studio, which is one classroom in TC Passios, we try to make sure it's reusable, movable, and we don't drill any holes because the walls are not suitable for us to drill holes in at the moment. So we make sure that we spend carefully and have that available when we do get our new studio. If there's any specific questions on that slide, now's a good time. Otherwise, we'll work with higher level numbers.
I will have some non-budgetary equipment questions later, but not right now. We'll save it to the end.
Okay. On the next page, this was provided by the finance department. This is the fringe or indirect costs. So these are the numbers that we are using, that the number on the far right-hand side, 47,900, would be the costs if we have Joe's salary properly prorated, if we have the production technician on board for the whole year and that person is benefited, and that person takes the maximum medical plan, which is the person's spouse and any offspring that he may be legally responsible for. So to be careful how we choose words occasionally to get these things right. So that 47,948 is included in the salary part of operations. On the next page, I tried to summarize the whole budget. So the salaries, 130...
Could I interrupt you for
Please.
just a second? So are you currently paying health insurance benefits to any employees?
To Joe.
Okay.
Joe is a 34-hour, I believe it is, but essentially a full-time employee,
Yeah.
fully benefited.
Okay, that's fine. My question is, we cover health insurance as a separate line in the town. So is that basically charged from the revolving fund or the enterprise fund from PAC to reimburse the town? Is that
Yes.
how that Karen's nodding her head, so, okay.
Good.
All right.
You are, 'cause that's what we do.
And therefore, that number would be subtracted from the health insurance line on the town budget for now, for accounting purposes, or,
For accounting purposes, it's accounted for.
okay. Got
Okay,
it.
that's fine. In fact, you will see on the previous slide, health insurance line is 0, and that's because it's embedded in this number here.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would be double accounting, and apparently that's naughty. So, the summary budget: salaries 113,000, indirect costs 48,000, with a total of 161,000. So the operations excluding the salaries, so this is all the other bits and pieces like running the office, minor equipment that's needed, maintenance for cameras, batteries for cameras, all the typical stuff that's needed was about 20,000. So the total operations 181,515. Our estimated income, which I went through on a previous slide, a little over 200,000. The capital of 30,000. Now this is our best guess. We're trying not to spend this. We have some expensive equipment, and if we have a catastrophic failure, for instance, of the server that's running this whole show in the little room back there, that takes $20,000 to replace it if it's not repairable. So we want enough sitting there that we can respond quickly if we have a major problem. The total for all of those comes to 211,515. The excess of budget over income, so this is beyond our 200,000, is about 11,000. And that money would come from retained earnings, because our backup monies are in this fund. The slight confusion with it certainly confuses me. You can't get access to it until it's been approved annually by the state. So it doesn't become available till July, maybe August, depends how well they're working. But there is enough money that we're using for our day-to-day expenses. We could hang in. What we don't want to have to do is, if we had a major issue, to wait until the fall meeting to get approval to fix it, and in the meantime we don't have a working system. So the total operations is less than the expected income. That one line is why I'm standing up here in front of you, trying to make sure we're all on the...
So, Mr. Walker, just to be
Sure.
clear then, the $30,000 line that you have for capital, which effectively contributes to that overage of 11,229,
It's yes.
is effectively, I mean, I know you're gonna, at some point you'll buy something, but this is effectively a reserve fund anticipating
Right.
a catastrophic failure.
Right.
You're not planning to be 11,000, you're not planning to go into retained earnings to 11,000.
This year, we're at the point of the year where if there's something that we really do need and we feel confident, we are moving forward with a portable lighting truss and some proper lighting on it, which will take some of that money there. At the same time, our budget for this year, we are running under because we don't have the product technician.
Right.
So we're trying to manage it responsibly. What I don't want us to be doing is to say on July the 1st, whoopee, let's spend $30,000. Bad practice.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for explaining that.
May I interrupt for a moment?
Please.
This sounds like trouble.
Oh, okay, I just agree with what Steve had said, but that $30,000 really should not be considered a reserve per se. It's money, like Steve had said, for a catastrophic situation. But it's all, it's a main part of the budget. It's not reserves per se.
Okay, I think we understand what it's for. I think whether you call it
Okay.
reserves or catastrophic or something else, it's,
Okay.
we understand what it
Okay.
means.
We
Thank you.
call it capital. Thank you, Joe. Okay, the PAC fund summary. This is one I try to put together each year. We do the best we can to understand what is in this fund. This is the fund we keep reserved ready for the new studio space when we get it. The money's paid to us from Comcast. Quarterly, we get a fee which is to do with operations. At the time of contract, we normally try and negotiate a capital improvements number. That was given to us over the first 3 years of the contract. So we don't get more capital for another 6 years. I suspect because of the way things are going on with the cable industry and such like, the next contract will not only be very difficult to negotiate, but will not include things like that. So we're trying to be very careful with this. The fund at the end of financial year 21 was 865,000 or so. The income for 22, 200,000 or so. The estimated expenses. So what we did is we took our expenses at a snapshot in time, tried to prorate them out to the end of the year. Also made any modifications because some of them don't prorate, like the rent we pay for the room in TC Passios is paid once a year. The estimated income for 23, 200,000. Estimated expenses, 211. If you have the spreadsheet, do what it's good at and add these up and subtract the ones that shouldn't be there, it leaves us with an estimated fund at the end of financial year 23 of 903,000 or thereabouts. This is targeted and being held, as I said, for new studio. Bear in mind, at the same time, costs are increasing. So no matter what you look at, if it includes any kind of real estate or even contractors doing work, which would have to be done, we're looking for 2,700 square feet, and I would be delighted if I could have a good estimate of timing, which is why I actually try and attend the municipal building meetings to encourage them if I possibly can. Just one tiny update on the next slide. The digital streaming is a couple of activities going on in the state because there are a lot of PAC-type organizations throughout the state, and they are trying to find a way that money is lost through cable cutting because people are moving to digital streaming, which essentially uses the same rights of way as the original contract was for, is dealt with. What they're looking at is having monies collected at the state level. 20% would go to the state general fund, 40% to municipalities, and 40% would go to community media, being PAC in this particular case. Some other states have actually managed to impose these fees. Sadly, the bills seem to be stalled at the moment. So we're trying to keep an eye on that. But our present income from Comcast is remarkably stable. So the very last slide is the one that has the proposed warrant as it would go out. One thing I would ask for, before we actually have the town meeting, when the motion is put up, it has specific numbers in. If I could have those before the town meeting, I'd appreciate it, so I'm not taken by surprise when I see them.
Okay.
Questions from anybody?
So, thank you very much, Mr. Walker, for your presentation. And this is, I say this every year, and I'd be remiss not to say it again. I think what you guys do is incredibly important in PAC.
Thank you. Thank Joe as well. Thank you, Joe.
I thank Joe frequently, but thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Joe also has to deal with my poor email skills and last-minute scheduling and those kinds of things. So.
My pleasure.
But I do think it's more important every year, particularly as local news coverage erodes,
Right.
and 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there would have been a reporter probably from the Sentinel and Enterprise and the Telegram at this meeting, and I've never seen a reporter for either of those publications at this meeting. We're fortunate that the Ledger covers occasionally a meeting here or there, usually one or two meetings a week, but the business, there just isn't a business model to support it anymore, and therefore, if people want to be informed, They can watch us live or watch us on YouTube and get the gist, in sort of a directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And
That's
I think
what we
that's
try and do
incredibly
for you.
important. So, I have gotten, I've seen a couple of comments on social media, and I've actually gotten one constituent call this year about image quality. And the issue, as best I can explain it, is that, for example, when we showed that slide, and in fact, I'm reminded to stop sharing now because I don't really need to share. But in that earlier slide that you showed with the budget numbers, that was
Right.
quite a crowded
Crowded
screen.
Of necessity, yes.
When somebody is watching that at home, they really can't see it
Right.
over the cable. And I'm not sure exactly why. I suspect that we're probably using standard definition equipment and it's getting bumped
no.
up and down and sideways.
Objection.
Okay, fair enough. Please explain.
We are using high definition equipment from end to end.
Okay.
So these are high def cameras. We have good quality audio. We keep everything on the server in high definition. Then we have to spend money to put a converter at the end of all of our equipment to bring it down to, as you suspect, standard definition. We do have an agreement. It's not so much an agreement. I think they called it some kind of additional letter that they put with the contract. So it's not binding, to give us one high definition channel. But right now, all our channels are standard definition. The issue with trying to bring in a high definition channel was some changes in the way the law was structured that lets us have the fees in the first place, that would allow Comcast to charge us for any capital improvements they had to make, or the true value of any services we're using. Now, the true value of a standard definition channel in today's cable systems is not very high, but I've only seen one estimate so far. But for a high definition channel, it would be $30,000. Now, I haven't got any other information to say if that's a good number or even if it's a bad number, which way is it bad? So we are not quite sure, because right now we use our operations money for salaries. We have videographers, we will have the production tech, and we have Joe. We're trying to manage this as best we can. I would personally be delighted to move all of them to high def, and we are ready. What we have not yet done, and still, I mean, we can try it and see what they say, is go back to Comcast and say, time's up, give us a channel. But please tell us before you do it what the real costs are going to be. That's our issue.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a quick one about
Yeah.
Comcast's fees. Since the number hasn't changed overall, but I assume cord cutting has been all over the place, has their fee actually gone up since 2019? Do you know?
Is what kind of?
The Comcast fee that is being delivered to you guys.
That was that slide, the one with the color.
But it doesn't say, so if the number of people subscribing to Comcast has dropped, but their fee per customer has increased.
Yes, you're onto one of the great unknowns.
Okay.
So I can eventually, like typically about 18 months later, find out how many subscribers there actually are in Lunenburg to Comcast, and same with every other town in the Commonwealth.
By 18 months?
It takes a while for them to populate the spreadsheet, which in itself is enormous. It's every town with cable going back a large number of years. We can go in there and check, but by the time we discover what it is, it's not tremendously useful. The other thing that changes depending on demographics of the moment and employment of the moment and COVID is people may cut back on the premium services, or they may decide, because the kids are at home all the time because of COVID, they want to upgrade to digital video recorder so they can watch Tom and Jerry day and night, which would be slightly horrifying, but they could indeed do that. So I can't, I'm absolutely with you. I would love to know that answer, but I'm sorry I don't.
It sounds really frustrating. The other one that I have, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe that the last subscriber number report was for 2020. It doesn't come out very often. The next one should be out soon. And just to add on that, Steve's numbers at the beginning of the presentation, most of our fees are in the $49,000 range. Sometimes it bumps down a little bit to 48, but our last fees collected for February of FY22 were over $50,000. So we're not really terribly impacted by that trend yet. On a minor level, yes, but something's going on in the industry that is not affecting us too greatly yet. I mean, that could all change. But right now, we're holding steady.
We're trying to stay prepared.
Yeah. Good.
The other question I have is that, is the fee only for Comcast customers who have cable, or is it Comcast customers who may have just a phone or internet or anything like
No,
that?
it's just actually the
Cable.
video services of cable.
Okay.
So if they use Comcast as an ISP, that's not included.
Okay.
Hence the issue with streaming video moving to that one.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Hearing none?
Okay, no, I'm just checking because I got a member who's on TV too, so
Oh, I'm sorry.
no worries. Just one other comment, you mentioned the studio space, and you and I had chatted briefly before the meeting. I think it's incredibly important that we figure that out, and I think now is the time to be creative and figure out how we can move the ball forward, particularly because, ideally, if we ever are to do a renovation at TC Passios, I think we're going to need to figure out how to do it below that threshold so that we don't have to
Right.
cross all these structural hurdles that we found that we needed to cross last time around. But that means reducing the space that we need to take care of in that building, and perhaps PAC is a candidate for that, and perhaps we need to find PAC a new home. But I think we need to think through that.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you're attending those meetings, and hopefully we'll come to that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you for your time.
all right, thank you very much. Okay, moving right along. Sewer. Evening, Barb. You want me to project your presentation as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, bear with me for a second.
Excuse me 1 second, guys.
Not quite ready yet, Dave, just bear with me for
Yeah,
a second here.
That's okay. You're running it up there, right, Mr. Beamore?
Yeah.
The slides, okay.
Yeah, I just got to figure out how to do it. And full screen. We are ready.
All set?
I think we're ready.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow members.
Evening, Mr.
Also,
Tom.
I'd like to say a hi to Jay, Simeone, and Joanna, and nothing but love to those guys. So Betty, I love you guys. Okay, tonight in March, this is the current SOA team that we have, and it's on the slides there, Mr. Beamore. Dave McDonald, I'm the chairman, live in Lunenburg, obviously. John Reynolds, he's our vice chair. Brett Ramson, he's our clerk. Mike Devakis is a member, and Michael Nault. Our staff was Rob Oliver at the DPW. We all know we miss him, and I'm sure we're going to be getting someone pretty soon. Barbara LaFave is standing here. She's been in the sewer since day one. Assistant business manager is Paula Bertram, and our minute taker is Jane Rainley. We want to thank the current people who served and people who have left. Rob Oliver was the previous DPW director. He left on March 14th. We do look forward to working with the new TBW director and to keep our systems going and on all that good stuff. We also want to welcome Paula Bertram. Paula just joined our team on March 14th as a part-time assistant to Barb. We wish her nothing but the best, and we can't pick a better candidate than Paula Bertram. So personally, we want to welcome her on board. Next slide is the town sewer. Lunenburg Commission was established in 2006. It operates under the Sewer Enterprise Fund. The town has 16 miles of gravity-fed sanitary sewer lines, 3.9 miles of forced mains, 2.3 miles of low-pressure sewer, with 7 lift stations and 3 major pump stations, which you might see on Leominster Road and so on. There's over 900 properties connected to the town sewer, and it's going to be growing, we hope, more and more. The town has contacted with various vendors to make our systems more efficient. We have outsourced our operations and management company, which is now called O&M, to Chad Empry. Chad Empry is a great guy. They handle the pump stations with Al Packard. We can't thank them enough for what they've been doing to help keep our costs low and our systems more than adequate. The flow assessment responsibility is the accurate functions of 3 flow meters. These flow meters are sending data that goes into the Fitchburg and Leominster. At one time, Fitchburg and Leominster used to have our billing done by water usage. That's changed. So everything now is done by flow, as we're going to be talking about as we go along in the presentation. After this year, the Sewer Commission, we plan, and it's on the next page. I can't
This is
see
the
that.
rate increase?
Yes.
Yep, it's up.
The Commission is planning to implement an 8% increase in the effort to offset the costs to run the sewer system. The last increase was done in 2013 that I know of. Then we had another increase in April 2020, which I personally was the one who came to above the board and talked about that. These rates are needed to increase for the responsibilities we have for the Fitchburg and Leominster IMA. Fitchburg increased their cost by 8% each year since 2018. We haven't. We try to maintain for our customers the very minimum. Leominster rates increased 4% every year since 2019. Again, those rates are combined. We try to keep our rates under control. Leominster overcharge for FY21 is based on all flow-based billing. And again, that was changed in 2021, Bob, I think it was. Yeah. So we had a major increase with our billing because of that. Both Leominster and Fitchburg have implemented debt services, Fitchburg starting in 2020, Leominster in 2021. Our O&M contractor increase of 4% will be effective on July 1st, 2022. We are experiencing an increase of cost of expenses with everyone experiencing cost of increase of expenses. The sewer system is no different. One thing I want to emphasize is that when the flow metering, we're working with the cities of Leominster to try to fix our I&I problem in that area. There is money out there. When we talk with our counterpart in the Leominster area, and we're going to be trying to hook up meetings with him to see what we can do to fix that Whalum area and to investigate it. Our I&I problem is the same thing as Leominster's. Leominster's very concerned about the problem in the Whalum district because no matter what, it all goes through as far as sewerage. And even though it isn't, it still has to be processed. So believe me, we're desperately looking into that.
Dave, could I interrupt for just a second?
Yes, sir.
Do you, as a sewer commission, have any kind of a handle as to how much infiltration you're getting compared to your, your total flow?
We do. Do we have those numbers, Bob, handy?
The numbers, I do know that we're low as far as the state is concerned.
We're lower than what the state, but unacceptable for the commission. I mean, we have a system that's supposed to be tight. Whalum, though, was done previously, always been a problem. We have to fix that. And Leominster agrees that that's a problem. So like Barbara said, we're lower than the state, but we should get those numbers, though. We can pass them along to you.
And we did have one repair done in
Yeah.
the past year.
But we've done all kinds of things in the past, from smoke testing to try to find some of the problems, but it does zero in on the Whalum district.
Thank you.
Yep. Operations and maintenance of this contract for the sewer system. That's CTE, which is our O&M company. In April 2020, we contacted Empry on a time and material basis until a new contract could be put out to bid. They came in right after COVID hit. We had a company that we parted our ways with. They came in and took over and did a magnificent job considering what was going on at the time. In May of 2020, we went out to bid, and we had a new contractor to manage the 10 pump stations. On September 20th, we hired Empry on a renewable 3-year contract. In fiscal year 23 will be the 3 years, and the contract will be up for renewal. CTS has been a great partner for the sewer district and have worked with they've been shown to be very effective and reliable. Due to the escalating costs, though, CTE requested an increase in year 3. We believe that our stations are in good hands and look forward to working with them on a long relationship. Next page. We also, in fiscal year 2020, we start paying a 20-year debt service to Fitchburg at approximately $20,000 a year. This will help Fitchburg and us with the infrastructure going on in Fitchburg. We also, in 2021, will be starting to pay debt services to Leominster through at least 2024, at which time we'll be negotiating a new IMA will be negotiated. And I think the I&I will be a big issue in that negotiation when we talk. Fiscal year 2021, $34,360. Fiscal year 2022 will be $38,000, and 2023 will be $38,185. During 2021, we changed over to paying Leominster and Fitchburg, all based on flow metering instead of water usage. Flow metering is running higher than water average due to the inflow and outflow infiltration. Next page, Mr. Beatmore. Continuing work to improve the bottom line. The Commission is committed to reducing inflow and outflow I&I, which can cause an increasing amount of watershed throughout the flow metering and thus increase Fitchburg and Leominster's water costs. Flow specimen has been brought flow meters equipment to the date, and the flow meters in the pits will help ensure accuracy and the flow data going through the meters from Fitchburg and Leominster. And these are tested every 6 months to a year. They come in. I'm sorry? Quarterly. And we usually have a commissioner, Mike Nault's usually there, making sure that the equipment is correct and so on. Other FY23 operating budgets. We've added a 24-hour part-time assistant to the business manager as of March. Again, thank you, Paula. That will be supporting the sewer business with the administration duties. As it comes close to 2021, we have approximately $1.8 million in retained earnings. FY23 budget requires transfer of retained earnings of $355,502 to fund the operating budget. Additional monies for the increase of Leominster uses costs due to changeover and flow. Leominster and Fitchburg require debt services payments, increased cost of operations and maintenance for the 10 pump stations. $50,000 were planned for capital expenditures such as pump stations, upgrades, manhole replacements, I&I remediation work, and by the DPW director. $184,000 in town debt services obligated over the estimated betterment revenues. Approximately $36,000 in transfer to OPEC in capital stabilization fund. Unexpended expenditures returned to retained earnings at the close of the fiscal year. And we're going to have Barb come up, and then we can have a little bit of discussion based on what we did last year and and again, these are budget numbers. It's very, very tough to budget retained earnings, and we're going to explain that to you, Rob.
Hello all.
Evening.
Evening. All right, so just the numbers you have in front of you. I don't know if I need to read them all out. I can explain. User charges are our quarterly bills, irrigation fees. That also includes the rate increase, the 8% rate increase that we're proposing for FY23. Connection fees, again, it's an estimated amount. Anything we're doing is budgeted. It's an estimate on what we can intend. If we were to have more in connection fees, we would have to raise expenses because we pay Leominster and Fitchburg the same amount, proportionally more. So it's a conservative estimate. Sewer bank fees required by the City of Leominster through the state for I&I collections upon connection. Penalties and interest for what we collect on late payments or demands. Drain layers, licensing. This year we're changing the grease trap annual permit. It had been waived the last couple years due to COVID and the struggling restaurants in our town. At this point, the commission had decided that we will just assess an annual fee if the establishments are in non-compliance. So that's where that comes from. Investment is an estimate, of course, and the transfers from the stabilization funds that we have, capital reserve goes directly to emergency capital expenditures. And again, if they're not used, it returns back to the stabilization fund. And that was, well, capital reserve. And then the reserve capacity stabilization fund is the amount that we actually have to pay Fitchburg for the debt service. So we have that money in the stabilization fund, so it is funding those debt service payments. And that's the revenues. On the expenses, payroll, it's increased this year due to the hiring of a new part-time person. And purchase of service includes our contract with the CTE folks and flow assessment, any improvements to infrastructure, any I&I repair, our legal fees, and engineering services. Utilities is just postage, water, electricity, phone, and fuel. And the other departmental expenses, Leominster and Fitchburg direct costs are the usages which are estimated quarterly payments that we'll need to make to Leominster and Fitchburg. The capital expenses are the debt service payments that we're making to them, and also, then the $50,000 that we were estimating for our own planned expenses. Miscellaneous is a small change. And then the indirect costs that we transferred to the town for the use of the buildings, the insurance liabilities, health and fringe benefits, health insurance. So that's the total of expenses. So we ran a deficit, so even with the 8% increase, we have a deficit of 134,385.82. It is the intent, I think, with the commission. We have to look at it every year, but we may have to do rate increases again. May do it on a more regular, smaller basis, but with the debt services and the increased costs with the flow metering versus the billing, the water usage, rate increases may be possible. But we would do it on a more regular and smaller basis, hopefully. Debt service is still high compared to our betterment fund revenues. So we're running a deficit again, 184,911. This continues just for 2 more years, FY23 and 24, and that is on the last slide. You see it kind of even out, where the betterment revenues and the debt service are much more in line. So combine the two, it's 319. We have a transfer to the OPEB trust fund payment that's done through the town, and then also to capital reserve. The commission has been trying to put 3% of our revenues into a capital reserve fund for emergency purchases, and that's the 35. So bottom line is we'll take from retained earnings 355,502 this year.
What is the practical benefit of moving money from retained earnings to capital reserves? I mean, it sounds kind of like moving it from your right pocket to your left.
It is. It's earmarked. It's for capital investment versus the reserve capacity is a special fund that was set up for new connections that hadn't paid in towards the Fitchburg and the Leominster line originally. So that one's earmarked for specifically IMAs that they're expecting to charge more. If Leominster comes back and charges us more for capacity, we have some monies in account. Those are collected along with connection fees. It is just earmarked. It's protected. It's retained earnings. It's available. It can be transferred at town meetings, but
Okay.
it's just gives us an idea of what we have for capital.
Does that also give you quicker access to it if you need it in a hurry?
need it, what?
If you need it in a hurry for a catastrophic event, rather than having to have town meeting pull it from
Well,
your
I think even
retained-
Karen can answer that for me, but stabilization fund withdrawal has to go, I believe, through town meeting.
So the retained earnings are like free cash that the town has. Retained earnings for an enterprise fund is the same thing as free cash for the town. So, like they say, it ain't free and it ain't cash. So once the retained earnings are certified by the Department of Revenue, they're transferred into the stabilization funds that the Sewer Commission want to have for the reserve capacity and capital. And they're not readily available because they require a town meeting vote to move the money out of them and also to put the money in. So they're not available without an appropriation by town meeting, just like when we put money into our general stabilization funds.
So both require votes. Moving money from retained earnings to anywhere requires a vote, but spending money out of a capital reserve stabilization account also requires a vote.
Correct.
Okay.
But retained earnings are, just like free cash, certified each year.
Yep.
So if you have it in one year and you have a really bad year the next year, you may not have it. So if you took what you had in the good year and put it into the stabilization fund, it's available to you.
Okay. Thank you.
And we also have 70,000 basically being transferred into our FY '23 that's available for the fiscal year. And the last screen is just it's a study of the betterment fund versus the debt service. It sounds worse now, but looking forward into 2025 and forward, we should be running a lot better and hopefully won't be running at a deficit at this time.
Is that because you're paying off notes? Is that
Yes.
effectively
Yeah.
what's happening there?
In 2025, the debt service goes way down.
Okay.
So if you guys have any questions for us, before you do though, let me just mention, as far as the retained earnings number that you see, last year we took our retained earnings number. We also use it to what you just said, Mr. Pastor, we put money to aside for maintenance our system, the pump station's all been upgraded and so on. There are funds out there, and maybe town manager could explain it. Is it the ARC money, yeah, I know that's going, a lot of it, some is going to sewer, some is going to stormwater. I don't think we worked out the numbers yet, but that's out there. The other thing is that we just received a payment from Metal, that's not in here,
Meadowwoods.
Meadowwoods,
So,
which will help our FY '22.
so the numbers I want to emphasize to you and the people at home, it's showing that worst case scenario, but there's revenues coming in to make up the difference, so it won't be as bad as you think it is. The other thing is, just when you do an increase, and we're very concerned, as Barbara said, about our customers. So an 8% increase sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but it equals an average home will be anywhere from $80 to $100 a year. But we have to keep up with what's going on. What was done in the past was there was never increases. So we're kind of gradually bringing it in, even if we put a 2% increase in next year, just to keep up with Fitchburg and Leominster. But again, we got to negotiate with Leominster over the next couple of years on the new IMA, and hopefully it'll be a good deal for both of us, because this all happened during the IMA. So it shouldn't have happened that way, so now we'll have a better way to budget it in the future. Now, any questions?
Yeah, do we have any way of measuring, like, what the cost is for the consumer versus other towns like ours? You know, what's the average cost per, I don't know, for the whatever, however you charge them?
I think the last time we did a survey, we were kind of like in the middle. We weren't the most expensive at all. We weren't the cheapest, but we were not the most expensive at all, actually, for sewer.
Bond does a survey of water and sewer rates, so it's available to, see, we are, up there, but not as high as other towns.
And again, the more customers come on, we try to spread that out as well. Like Barbara said, when COVID hit, the restaurants took a beating, so the commission, we didn't charge for our grease traps. And we sat there and said, why are we charging for the grease traps? It's not right as a business. So we stopped doing it, but like Barbara said, if a business is non-compliant and tells us to go, we're not gonna pay you, then we'll fine them. And that's how you make the monies back. So most of our restaurants in town have been great, once they learn the policies.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just a couple questions. So I'm just trying to understand the fundamental economics of how this gets charged. So there's the charges for the users, so those that are on the sewer, right, as opposed to others who are not on the sewer.
Right.
And so that's where that 8% increase is going. And then I'm sorry, it's not up on the screen, but the 350,000 that's coming from,
Retained
I'm sorry,
earnings.
yes.
Yeah.
So is that a town-wide
No.
funding?
Just a sewer.
But it's coming from the sewer
Enterprise.
enterprise. Okay, all right. So for those, I guess, residents or whatever that are not on sewer, are they paying any of the charges at all for sewer? Okay,
Most of, anyone that's on the line but not connected is paying a betterment, and,
betterment.
yeah.
And that's what I was gonna ask too, is can you explain the betterment?
Betterment is paying down the debt, and that's that last page.
Yeah.
These are customers, whether they're connected or not, that contribute to the payment of the debt that the town took out in order to install the sewers.
But a
So
definition of a betterment is that if you lived on Northfield Road and you're not on sewer, you have a septic, but if the sewer line goes through in front of your house and it has a tie-in, you're gonna pay a betterment. And that's the system that's been started from day one, because your house is better. So if you ever need to get off of septic, if your septic fails, then you can tie in the sewer.
Got it, thank you.
Tom, and again, that's not town-wide, though. That's just where the sewer lines run.
Right, right.
Now, there is some, every day people tying in, and if you go to the town website and go to the sewer, you'll see our maps where we have our sewer lines. But there's always expansion, people are coming in day and night and want to open up an area or whatever, and if we could do it, and if it gets passed. So if you live on an area that's not sewered, and if you can get your neighbors, 2/3 of them to, is it 2/3? Yeah, to join in, we can get sewer on that street. And it happens a lot of individual companies on Lakeview, I think, did it?
Right,
There's a good example of that. They live off of Lakeview, which is up by Welland, and they didn't have sewer, and all their systems were failing. So they all got together and put in a system. It also happened here, like one of our members, John Reynolds, on Leominster Road, right at the beginning. Lancaster, this goes over in Lancaster, that intersection anyways. Neighbors, I think 10 neighbors got together and put an E1 system in. So anything can be done. We're here to help more than anything. And even now, if you guys, or anyone at home has a sewer line going in front of your house, call Barbara or Paula and get connected. It's a lot cheaper than going into getting a septic system today, because septic systems, and Dave, you might know the cost, it wasn't like when I was a kid,
The numbers I quote nowadays, and this is just from listening to the industry, $40,000 to $60,000.
Yeah, it's nuts, and like I say, our fees aren't that bad to run sewer. So if I can urge people to take a look at it, it's good for the environment, it's good for everything, but it'll save you money in the long run.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that's your lesson on sewer today. Tomorrow,
Thank you very much.
oh, one more thing. This will be, after this election, I'll be stepping down as the chair. We have a very good board, and I expect some good members to step forward and take over as the chair. I'll still run the committee, but I'm very proud to be working with our commission and our people and town managers. So, again, thank you guys. So hopefully you won't see me next year.
Yeah, I think we'll see you for one thing or another.
Thank you, guys. God bless.
Thanks, Dave. Good talking to you. Thanks for coming.
Sewer in town.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, this is John Reynolds. Can anyone hear me right now?
Yeah, Mr. Reynolds, go ahead.
Yes, hi, I'm Vice Chair of the Sewer Commission. I haven't been able to join until right now. And I would just like to say that Barb and Dave have done an incredible job. And it's tough. I know the rates in Lunenburg are high, It's difficult because they're not a large city, and I would encourage anyone to please get involved. Please get involved, all they can, with the town politics, the sewer commission, and as a ratepayer, I'm not unhappy with the 8%. Obviously, I voted for that. And I think that as a town, we need to look at the sewer commission, sewer rates as a whole. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to Dave and Barb for the presentation they made tonight. And I hope that if anyone has any questions, say please, 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 you feel free to ask us any questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Next up on our list is other moneyed articles. We were thinking we might flip the switch on this and do Board of Health, but they're not here yet. Shockingly, we're on time. And I had told the Board of Health to be here at 8:30, so they're not here yet, so we're going to... So I am going to... should I pull up the document you sent, Heather?
The draft warrant?
Yeah.
Sure, we can.
Does that make sense?
It's a good place to start.
Bear with me while I fumble. All right. We are up.
Okay. So the first two articles are annual articles. Second being the revolving fund article. That's every year we have to revote the spending limits. We have a bylaw that exists that was part of a change in Mass General Law, but every year we have to do the spending limit thresholds.
And those are recommended by, like, for example, the ambulance, that's recommended by the fire chief, or how does that,
I would
how
say-
do we come to those numbers, I guess, is my question.
I would say the finance director, knows what those revolving funds take in and take out, and she
Yeah.
would recommend any changes if need be.
Okay.
C is prior year expense. Right now, there's only one known prior year expense, and that's for $500. D is our amendment to the fiscal '22 budget article, and that article will incorporate the adjustments that will need to be made for the snow and ice budget, particularly. That will be part of that article. So I believe that number is now up to around 180,000. Correct. That will
Are there
incorporate that.
other amounts in there that will be broken down, or is it just the ice and snow?
Snow and ice, and to transfer amount into the salary reserve to cover the collective bargaining
Right, thank you.
article.
And this money is coming from unappropriated 2022 money, or where?
Yes.
That's where it's coming from?
Yeah,
Okay.
unexpended, yeah. Not unappropriated. So it's already been appropriated at
Okay.
last year's meeting. It would just be balances that won't be fully expended by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, so are you going to stipulate what lines those are coming
Yes,
from?
as we normally do, we'll have a chart to say where the funding adjustments will be.
Okay. And do you anticipate that we'll have a game plan on that next week, or is this something we will likely defer and then come back to?
I think we'll have a game plan next week. The finance director and I will work out those specifics.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that? No? All right.
We do that every year, right?
Yes.
If we need to.
If we, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I can't think of a year since I've been here that we haven't done it, but it's usually every year.
Ice and snow is an annual.
Yes, and I'll get to that a little later. E is the collective bargaining agreement to fund the first year of the clerical unit. And that cost of year one, which is actually the year we're in, fiscal '22, is $15,303.51.
I'm sorry, I'm fumbling.
E.
E, and what was the number again, Heather?
$15,303.51. That represents a 2% COLA.
Okay.
And that would be out of the salary reserve account. So where we do the budget adjustment in the article, be coming right out of that.
And this is retroactive to
Yes, July 1.
July 1 of '21.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're funding the first year of the contract, but out of salary reserve because it's in this fiscal year.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
And F is capital plan. And there's been no changes to the capital plan. And I'm sure we'll go into that. Well, I talked about the change to the scope of the work for the Flat Hill Road project last night. So there will be that adjustment in the art and the slides for the capital plan.
You anticipate the
presentation.
number will stay the same?
I hope I have a defined number by next week, but I can't promise that I
Okay.
will.
So that may need to be something that we wrestle with in April.
Yes, I can talk to the engineer to see what his thoughts are on that appropriation.
Okay.
And G is the omnibus budget. So I did send right before the meeting the adjustment adjustment worksheet.
I don't think I saw that, but I'll
Okay.
take your word for it.
All right.
Came in just as we
Yeah, just
started the meeting.
I was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just before. So the one change that I'm going to take the recommendation of the finance committee we reviewed and recommending a change in the budget is the snow and ice number. Looking at the past 5 years, Karen calculated it's approximately $380,000 on average that we've spent. So the recommendation would be to increase it to $350,000. And we think that's, we wouldn't be looking for $180,000 at this point in time if we had that. And based on historical patterns, there were years prior that it was much lower than that, but that's the trend now.
Heather, if I remember, the lowest year we had was just under 100,000,
Yeah, and that was going back to what, 16 or
something like
yeah.
that. I was going to say 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having made that recommendation, I support it. What is the delta?
71,000, and that's on the adjustment
Okay.
sheet.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Going down the line, H is the stabilization fund. Right now, the recommendation is 100,000 of free cash to go into that account. The finance director and I are going to look at both the stabilization fund and the special purpose stabilization fund and may recommend to increase those amounts given our current balance of free cash right now. It's about approximately $500,000 of free cash remaining. So increasing those two accounts and still leaving a balance to fall towards next year's free cash to help fund next year's capital and other articles such as this.
We're at, so with respect to the regular stabilization account, last I recall, we were hovering right around whatever that policy-driven number was. I want to say 5% or something.
It's 5%, and we're actually above the 5% right
Yeah.
now. It's not by a whole lot of percentage points, but I want to say it's probably about 7. I actually have a sheet that calculates that I can provide to you guys so you can see that.
So, and I don't know if this is feasible, but, and I'm glad we're doing this, and I 100% support putting this money in stabilization of one flavor or another. I'm I'm thinking about, you know, like credit rating and borrowing capacity and that kind of thing on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm also thinking about needing to buy fire trucks and ambulances in a few years. And, you know, we have the money, let's put the money and earmark it for that. So we, you know, and we can articulate where we're gonna spend it rather than the stabilization, the regular stabilization account, which I think most people just think is a savings account we're never gonna touch, right? And so for whatever that's worth, there's some financial
There's,
analysis
yeah,
that could
an
go into
imbalance
that.
there.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be, think that both are good paths to go. When I talked about the special purpose stabilization fund, and when we did the financial forecast, if we continue to put 250,000 in each year into that account, we're going to be able to pay for all those large capital projects. So anywhere that more that gets us closer to that is
So long as the
good choice.
cost of fire trucks stays stable,
Yeah,
you know,
so we
which,
outpace inflation and,
Yeah.
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 So the special purpose stabilization, right now, the recommendation is 250 from free cash. The OPEB trust fund, which
What
is.
number are we on?
Now we're on J.
HIJ, here we go, okay.
The recommendation is for 266,692 per our financial policy of 10% of the previous year's certified free cash into that account. K is the Solid Waste Disposal Enterprise Fund. That number is remaining the same as fiscal '22, 302,000. L is the Water Enterprise Fund for fiscal '23, and that number is remaining the same at 25,000. M, you just heard from PAC about the Public Educational and Government Access Enterprise Fund. That totals 211,515. N is transferring 10,000 from the sale of cemetery lots into a capital project fund to be used for the care, improvement, and embellishment of town cemeteries. And moving along to the next moneyed article, it would be P. And that is for the Woodruff property, to clean up that property that we went through conservation and got the approved order of conditions on. That would be 100,000 from free cash.
Is there gonna be a presentation on that?
I will have some slides on that, just to give people an idea. And
Yeah, I mean, what we kind of have now is what we heard at town meeting last year. Like, I don't think we've had any kind of discussion about that property.
not at town meeting, only last time it was brought to our attention by the resident.
Right, that's
That was
what
the
I
last
mean.
time it was.
Yeah.
discussed. But I have been in touch with that resident all along, too.
Well, that's, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad to hear we're dealing with it. It's $100,000, and I feel like as the finance committee, if we're gonna make a recommendation on this, we ought to know a little bit of detail of what we're spending money on. So I just, we haven't had that discussion yet, so if we could, next
Yeah,
week.
so generally, it's gonna cover the environmental consultants, the permitting process, going through, the specifications for the work, the actual construction, going out to bid, construction removal of the process, doing all the perimeter, silt and hay bales, that, securing that, and there'll probably be like a final, I don't know if there's an as-built, in the end product that the consultant will provide.
Okay. Yeah, I think
But
we just
I'll
need to see
summarize
this
it and-
somewhere, and, yeah. And I mean, I think town meeting is gonna need a.
Yeah, and
sort
some visuals
on that.
too will help.
Yeah. Yeah,
see-
exactly.
See the
Right.
issue. Q right now, because this is an article from the select board, so there's no dollar number that I have right now for that. There would be a sum of money. I don't see it as a large sum of money,
This is-
maybe
yeah, we talked-
$10,000, to just start them off with communication. Down the road, they'll be requesting more money for that committee to do. for the 300th anniversary.
So will the intent on this be that, I mean, the article effectively approves the formation of the committee, although the select board could form it on its own
Yes.
without funding
Yeah.
anytime. Has the select board put any parameters around like number of people, term,
They haven't
appointing
discussed,
schedule, anything like that?
no, they haven't discussed that yet.
Okay.
No, just that they wanted an article to memorialize it. And
So I do think that we need some kind of framework for this, rather than just putting money into a fund for a committee that has yet to be formed. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, and not necessarily for next week,
Yeah, it won't happen because they
but,
don't have
but
a
I
meeting
feel like
till
if we're
the
gonna go
5th.
to, if we're gonna go to town meeting and we're gonna describe funding a committee, we ought to be able to articulate what that committee is going to be and what their charge is gonna be. Anyway, my 2 cents, but I think we should do it, and I think we should put whatever modest amount of money is to fund it. But I think
Just
that
more of an
just
explanation.
knowing how town meeting operates, we're gonna want a little bit of detail on this.
Article R is for the old primary school. That's for the demolition and for all the related engineering services for that project. So, and we did get approval from the APDC for the certificate to alter, so the demolition can proceed. That number is $450,000 from free cash.
And the town manager and I had discussed this briefly before the meeting tonight. We will have a breakdown in terms of the tear down and the engineering costs, because we're combining the article here. I support doing both wholeheartedly, but there could very well be some discussion and possibly even an amendment around splitting them. So I think we need to be prepared with a little bit of detail on this one too, just in case that conversation ensues.
Heather, could you repeat just quickly what the engineering's for? Is it for the proposal that the select board has been given by the landscape architect?
Yes, and demolition plans as well. So that firm would handle,
Right, there's gonna
all
be a
the-
plan developed before you can demolish,
right,
right? And the remediation is in the capital plan,
yes.
okay? So we're spending, what's the number in the capital? Do you remember?
371,
I'm sorry?
371.
371. Okay, so we're spending 800,000 plus to get the building down?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to know what the engineering cost is that's rolled into the article.
Yeah, and that's if, that's a estimate, hopefully comes in less, so. But
The nice thing
especially since
here-
we're doing some of the remediation now with the 50,000 we got from the state.
So that's a good question, and I don't recall, the 371 was the whole number, but there's actually a $50,000 earmark that we're gonna attach to that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So the other great way that I think of looking at this is that, I at least had sticker shock when I saw the estimate from the landscape architects for that property for $4.5-ish million. But we're spending about a little over 800K right now that is part of that number, right? So we're, starting to kind of chip away at that number with available money this year that, theoretically, we don't have to borrow or use from ARPA or whatever to do that project.
And I would venture to guess that it's probably 60% of that 450,000 that's going towards engineering and,
Probably in the ballpark,
Yeah.
at least,
okay.
yeah.
And knowing that the cost to actually take the building down and haul it away is really not that high. It's the remediation and everything else involved.
So the other way to think about this or look at it is that, if this passes as written or as described, we are on the path to putting a park there. like, you know, because
We're on the path, yeah.
we're on the path now.
Yeah.
But we're really on the path if we're dedicating a substantial plan to that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we kind of flirted with it with a, you know, sort of, it was like a conceptual design and a feasibility kind of view.
Now you're drilling it down to the nitty-gritty of
Right.
this is what it's gonna be.
Right.
This is how much it's gonna cost after this money's spent.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. So, and I, you know, again, I support it, but I think that people need to be clear-eyed on this. Because we're talking about something that is going to come with an additional $3.7 million in cost when it's all said and done.
With this money that this warrant is talking about, it's knocking down the building, and is it gonna be, and they're doing the design for that, but so what will it look like? Will it just be dirt, or will it be a hole in the ground?
After this is done, you've got basically a dirt lot,
Dirt,
right?
okay,
But
so-
you'll also have plans and an estimate to develop the property, yeah, yeah.
But I'm just concerned there'll be a hole in the ground, waiting for us to fill it in and put the park on top. No, it's gonna
Dirt. Well, it's a good question, because there's a basement to that building, so there's gonna have to be some kind of leveling that'll go
Right.
on, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
Because it would be a hole, you're absolutely right.
It does
Yeah.
slope,
Now that I think
though,
about it, you're
down.
absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, it does slope down. That's a walkout basement there. Walkout back, so.
Yeah, so it isn't like you have to fill the entire footprint for
Right.
But it
10
is
feet of material.
It is a good
Right.
cut into that hill, so,
Yeah.
okay. Well, good discussion, I'm sure we'll have.
X is the next money.
S?
X,
X,
as an X-ray.
bear with me while I find it. T,
A, B, C, D.
U, U,
These long-winded things.
this must be a planning board article.
Yeah, it's got.
Yes. Yeah.
V, X, here we go, all right.
All right, this is for the adjustment to the salary schedule, the salary administration plan for fiscal '23. So the Personnel Committee, they'll be, next week, someone from the Personnel Committee that will review this article, as well as they have a couple other articles.
And is there this doesn't have a dollar value attached to it, this is basically a schedule, right?
It has an impact, yes, it would have an impact to fiscal '23.
Right,
Which
but we're
would
not
come-
appropriating money on this.
No, because it would come out of the salary reserve account in the fiscal '23 budget.
Okay. So are we gonna, so when is the personnel committee meeting?
They've already voted on this article,
Okay,
so they do have the wage schedule for that article. And what, one of the goals that they had was to address wages below state minimum wage. So there are certain grades that you're going to see are a much larger percentage just to adjust for state minimum wage, because our beginning wage started at $11.10.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, those are much higher percentages, but most of the grades below that, once you get away from those, they adjusted where they'd still see increases, but it's around 2% for those other grades.
okay. And are we gonna get some detail on
Yes.
this next week?
Z is the Sewer Enterprise Fund for fiscal '23. AA is the Sewer Capital Reserve Stabilization Fund. BB is the transfer from sewer to the OPEB Sewer Trust Fund. And which we typically consolidate into one article. The OPEB, yeah. So you might see a reduction into one article. We usually just have the funding sources under that one article, just more efficient.
Okay. Are these typically consent calendar?
Yes, I think I'd have to look for last year. Yeah, and I think that was all the moneyed articles.
Okay. So obviously, there's a lot more detail to discuss when we go through these by article next week. For a lot of, I wrote down the total numbers on the ones that struck me. When this gets updated next week, could you just add some kind of commentary, or even just put in brackets or something like what I know in some of these, you're not going to have a number, and in those, if there isn't a number, we will probably defer. But those that we have an estimated number that might change, we can put it in brackets, vote on it next week, and if it changes, we can we can either take it up on the 14th or caucus before town meeting or something and deal with it then. But I'd like to knock off as much as we can next Thursday.
Okay.
So.
Not a problem. Any other questions before? I think I'm on time too.
I can't believe we're on time. I'm shocked. If you had told me we'd been an hour late right now, I would have totally bought it. So, okay,
All right.
we're good.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, Board of Health.
Where? And I can say that.
You can.
So, gentlemen, if you could come to the microphone, we're on television, so you gotta.
George is the chairman, so I'm gonna let him.
Both come on up. I'll let you introduce yourselves. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, and then I'll kind of introduce the discussion.
Oh, okay.
We can't hear you if you don't come to the mic, George.
That's why I was gonna sit up here and holler. I'm good at that.
I know you are.
George is very good at being heard.
So, good evening, gentlemen. This is unprecedented in my tenure on the Finance Committee. So,
Well, quite frankly, it's unprecedented for us.
well, that's good. I like to break precedent.
Well,
So-
because of the way that our setup is, it's unusual to be asked to come. But go ahead.
I'm totally okay with that.
Let me introduce, I see some unfamiliar faces up here.
Yeah,
I
so
see a few that I know.
So let me, by way of introduction, just kind of set this up for people who are watching at home. As I've said, we have not met with representation of the Board of Health in my tenure on the Finance Committee. Our role as a committee is we're the only subcommittee of town meeting. So town meeting is charged with appropriating the money that funds the town. And authorizing the tax levy that draws the money that pays for everything that we do in the town. And the Finance Committee's role is basically to vet that plan prior to town meeting. And most of what we do as Finance Committee members is work through the entire budget by department. So, in fact, you are the last department that we are hearing from. We've been meeting 2 to 3 hours weekly, this week twice weekly, for about 8 weeks on the budget, and have heard from basically every department in town. We have not historically heard from the Board of Health. Your appropriation is relatively small compared to all of the other committees and boards that are represented here.
Indeed.
And I think for that matter alone, it's been sort of a pro forma number on the budget, and it's been voted on as a pro forma matter. This year, when we got the initial
Budget request.
the initial budget request, the number moved more substantially than basically any
Than
other
usual,
department,
yes.
which caused a reason to say, all right, well, let's have a conversation about
Okay,
that,
okay.
just so that we understand
Sure.
what it is we're paying for here.
Yep,
And
okay.
why the number moved. So what I'd like to do this evening is take the opportunity first just to, obviously for you gentlemen to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you do and what the Board of Health does, and then if it gives kind of a thumbnail on what's going on with the budget.
Sure, not a problem. Anyway, for those of you who don't know me, I'm George Eamon. I'm chairman of the Board of Health here in town. This is James Gariffi. Jim is the director of the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, of which I also serve as the chairman of the board of directors for Neshoba and have for the last 29 years or so. So I'm the chief executive officer, and it's fine that I'm here. To address your major question, one of the other reasons is our budget is relatively small. The Neshoba budget for this particular year is based on a population breakdown. What we do is we use the previous census, which was in 2010, and each year we add a small increment to cover a cost of our doing business, the increase in salaries and wages, just like we do here, no difference. And this year, we discovered by doing population, we used it 2010 and the new populations, and Lunenburg's population went up by, what, 1,400? 1,406, wasn't it? Yeah.
About 16%.
Yeah, about 16%. And then what we do is we take all the populations for all the 15 towns. This year it's 15, it'll be 16 next year. And we rate them based on percentage. And the percentage is then translated into our budget, which yields our assessment for Lunenburg. Lunenburg's assessment went up by 16%, and that's, I think if you calculated it, it would come out to be about that same difference. We grew. We were the town in Neshoba that grew so greatly. Next year, it won't. It'll go up minimally because what we'll do is we'll do the same as we always do, is we put a small increment because we're using it based on the latest possible federal census. That's how we get the number.
So it's strictly a direct relationship, population
yep,
to total budget.
And then we translate those percentages into per capita, and the per capita is $4.33 per each person in the town. That's how it works. It's really, really simple. The other thing that I'm not sure if you're aware of or not is that portion of the Board of Health, Lunenburg Board of Health budget is not adjustable by your board or by the town. It just has to be paid. It's because it's almost like a contract. It's the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health was formed in 1931 by an act of the legislature not as a replacement, but as the individuals who will actually perform many of the Board of Health duties which require licenses and things of that nature that we don't actually perform ourselves. I think one of the reasons they don't bother us is because probably this board didn't know that, but some of the other boards became aware of it and just said, look, for the lousy $50,000 or $40,000 that we're paying for the local office, it's just not worth, because we know exactly why the budget's up there. But that's it. That's the reason why. Anybody have any questions? We'll be happy to answer them.
I sure do. So, first of all, do you also have domain responsibility for Neshoba Nursing, or is that a different thing?
Yes. We have Neshoba, the environmental group, which handles all septic systems, inspections of restaurants, a whole host of different items. We have the nursing service, and we also have a hospice there where we take care of people who are in the last throes of their lives. I'm very proud of that one because I'm the one who started it back about 25 years ago.
So would that be, how would somebody find that service? Would they have to qualify, like, based on income or something along those lines?
No. No, there's no income limits to anything we provide. Most of our income, quite frankly, comes from insurance,
Okay, so you bill through it.
Yeah, Medicare, that sort of thing.
Got it. So just so people who are at home who are not looking at the omnibus budget recommendation, the Neshoba Board of Health number is $36,759.84. That actually represents a 22.4% increase over last year's budgeted amount. And the Neshoba Nursing number is $16,848.26, which represents a 22.93% increase. So, so just so people know. So could you give us some kind of characterization? So before I get into the Neshoba budget, are there any funds spent locally for the administration of your board, or does everything go up to Neshoba?
It all goes to Neshoba.
Okay.
Yep.
And then basically gets
Yeah,
spent through
the-
Neshoba.
Septic system permits, they retain that. I don't remember what our budget number was this year. Our total budget to run the entire operation, I don't remember. Something on the order of,
$1.3 million
Yeah.
for the 16 town,
Yeah.
15 towns this coming year.
yeah, so that's the budget. Well, again, it's hard to determine individually. I don't have that information. But the duties they perform, the permits, and that's where that money comes from. The permitting comes out of actually the town doesn't pay for it. The individuals who's having a new septic system have an engineer who's going to come and install it for them, design it for them. There's a permit that's involved there. That money goes to Neshoba.
Okay.
It becomes part of the budget.
Just as an observation, so the number, the 14% increase that we've had in population is obviously proportionally smaller than the 22 to 23% increase that we're seeing from the Board of Health. Obviously, you guys have been pretty busy the last couple of years for
tell me
fairly
about
obvious reasons. You've been consulting with our town leadership, school department leadership, God knows what else, but I see you guys referenced in a lot of different meetings. Has COVID been a budget driver for the Board of Health, or could you comment on that a little bit?
Well, some of the in-town work, if we have complaints, we've been going around ourselves, my administrative assistant, myself. If we'll go around and make sure if we have a complaint, we'll respond to the complaints ourselves. If we have other issues that we decide that needs more expertise and perhaps some citations, neither of us are actually sanitarians or licensed sanitarians, so we can go in as Board of Health authority and use our authority to be able to castigate them or even fine them in some cases. When it becomes a little bit more hairy is if we have a report of a COVID incident, then we will notify Neshoba. And Jim or one of our other agents will come down and investigate it and make sure that it's taken care of. All of the tracking of COVID patients goes through Neshoba. We don't do any of that internally, again, because it's a pretty complicated matter, and sometimes we can get some grants to help us out with that, but for the most part, it comes out of your pocket.
Yeah.
It's one of the, I was sitting around this afternoon looking for this and I couldn't find it, so I jumped onto the internet, and I went to the Department of Public Health, and I printed that out. That's the things that we're responsible for. Well, some of them we don't get involved in, but those are the things that boards of health in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are responsible for. I don't know how many are in there. There's an awful lot.
Yeah,
I was going to print out some more, but I ran out of ink.
So for what it's worth, and I appreciate you doing that, Mr. Freeman.
Not a problem.
This is a 21-page document that is fairly detailed in terms of the responsibilities. So suffice to say, if all this is happening, we're probably getting our
We keep busy.
$60,000 money's worth.
As far as our in-town budget goes, as you pointed out, it's not very much, about 90, I didn't actually check it this year, but budget usually runs about 92 and 93% wages, salary only. And the rest of it we live on. And I'm proud to say that at the end of each year, since I've been on the board, which is 31 years, we've been able to return some money to the town at the end of the year. Not much, a couple $100, but we do it anyway. Matter of pride.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? We also have I'm remiss, we have a Board of Health member on our board.
Yes,
as
you
well,
do.
so I probably should have mentioned that as well. Mr. Waters is
I got him in training.
He's an elected
He doesn't
member
know
of
it,
the
but I
Board.
got him in training. Right, Evan?
It's true.
So in any event, any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, Peter, do you have the percent increase on that, what's basically the salary line, the in-town expense? It was only a couple percent, wasn't it?
So the way the health and sanitation is broken out, there's a salary administrative line of general health of $41,516.
Right, that's in-house, okay.
And there's a longevity line of like $1,350. So the total is $42,866. So that's being spent in-house, I assume, right?
Yeah, that's union increases. That's nothing to do with us.
Okay. And then there's supplies and miscellaneous expenses of another $1,785, all of which is level funded. Actually, interestingly, Dave, your salary line is actually down 0.36%. So it's reduced for whatever reason. So your total general health local is 44,651, which is actually a reduction.
I would suspect that's one of the lowest budgets in the town.
It's right in the neighborhood, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
the
up there.
reason for asking the question is that 99%, in my mind, and the percentage may be wrong, but I'm just going to say that it's 99% of the work, health work that's done in Lunenburg is done by Neshoba. And that's why, as you see those numbers, that's where 80 or 90% of the overall health budget for Lunenburg is in those two line items.
Yep.
And
It's not 99, but it's
As point of
60.
information, useful or not,
60%.
is it 60? Okay.
twice during my tenure on the board, we've been asked to determine what it would cost to run our own Board of Health. We did it, and it just vanished immediately. If you were just to hire one agent, which is ridiculous, you'd need multiple people to run a Board of Health. An agent coming in, and I just checked with Jim the other day, is somewhere between $70,000 and $75,000 a year. Base salary, not counting benefits or vacations or anything else. It's a highly professional field. Nurses, they're not inexpensive either. And it just would not be feasible. We know of one town who is in the process of trying to do that elsewhere. And they seem to be backing away from that real quick when they're out there trying to find people and seeing what the wages and salaries are. We are very, very fortunate to have this. We are pretty much unique in the Commonwealth.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Excellent. Yes,
Greatly
thank you.
appreciate you
Yes.
coming out tonight and giving us a quick
I'm going to-
education.
We'll see you a week from Monday.
Yes, I'll be there.
All right. The Terry Birchfield is haunting me. I lost my agenda for a minute. Okay. Annual town meeting warrant updates we have covered. Warrant letter update. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Simeone has emailed some suggested changes in wording and a couple of minor changes in a few different paragraphs. I received that right before tonight's meeting. It turns out that Jay has a talent for writing, which
No.
which we were not. I was not previously attuned to. So bank that for whatever it's worth. The suggestions were quite good, I must say. Very concise. So I will incorporate his changes into my document and circulate that in the next couple of days. One additional paragraph that I just kind of wanted to read into you guys, and I did print it, but it's going to be too hard to share it, is Chris had suggested doing something around the IT budget and sort of the interdepartmental cooperation theme that we've touched upon this year. So this is what I wrote, and I think it needs some word finessing, but this year's budget includes a 4.1% increase in the IT budget for a total of $316,022.89. In addition, the Lunenburg School District has budgeted X dollars for IT. I need to get into the school department budget to get that number. In late FY21, the town began the process of transferring the function of IT strategy and leadership to a private firm, which works in close consultation with the town and school department leadership. Since then, following a comprehensive review and an upgrade of networking and cloud services has commenced, which will continue into FY23. Additionally, a rotational upgrade program is being instituted for computers and other endpoints throughout our operations. The town website will also get regular upgrades. These programs are drastically improving the quality and reliability of our IT infrastructure and improving our security posture. The Finance Committee was very pleased with this out-of-the-box thinking and interdepartmental cooperation and encourages departments to find similar synergies and opportunities for collaboration and cost sharing. A little wordier than it probably needs to be. And again, I'll circulate that to you guys, but that, I think, was in the spirit of what Chris had suggested, and, you know, if you guys want to recommend changes to that, I'd be happy to entertain them. Any other comments on the warrant letter at this point?
When do you want comments back?
Good question. So my hope would be to get this out to you guys tomorrow. That may be a bit ambitious on my part. I may be away this weekend, so it could be as late as Monday. If you could get it to me by Wednesday, obviously just give me 24 hours to kind of compile any recommendations. And if there's anything controversial, I'll probably highlight it in advance and email it around in advance, but we can hash it out at next week's meeting too. Ideally, I'd love to come out of next week's meeting with a completed letter. Like, that would be awesome. By the way, I don't think we've managed to pull that off in 3 years. It's usually been a last minute thing by email, but I'd love to be able to pull it off in a public meeting next week. Okay. We don't have any minutes to report on. Are there any committee reports?
I'd just like to update one thing I mentioned last evening and at the Select Board's meeting, I believe. The Parks Commission meeting next Tuesday evening, our landscape architects will not be at that meeting. We will be, the board or the commission will be reviewing the two proposals and coming up with additional information that we'd like the architects to incorporate, and then they'll be back at a future meeting. And then that will give us the bulk of the meeting to talk about the town beach.
Okay.
And the beach season opening and the whole, everything that goes with the beach for next season.
Does the Marshall Park project, does that ultimately get reported out someplace officially? Like, you know, once you kind of have the plan, what happens with that? Does it?
My impression is that once we have the plan with some estimated numbers attached to it, then it's in the commission's ballpark to decide what the next steps are.
Okay, so you're not planning to report that out to town meeting or the select board or anything and say, here's the results, this is where we're at?
Not that we've discussed it all, I don't believe so. I don't think we're far enough along to have anything.
Nor do I. I don't
Yeah,
think,
right.
so the nature of my question was kind of what's the, is there a milestone that you're heading toward that is connected to a decision point that goes greater than the Parks Commission?
Let me absorb that for just a second.
Yep.
First of all, this process that we're in right now goes until early May, which puts us right up to town meeting or after. So there'll be no final design till after town meeting. And as I said, next steps are up to the commission beyond that. As we've said right along, we're going to do our very best to find funding sources that are outside of the tax levy. I'm getting a little concerned because I think, as you've mentioned the numbers for the School Street project, the numbers for Marshall Park as presently designed are going to be much higher than that. So that will be probably our first discussion once the numbers come out.
Okay.
That's about the best I can give you right now.
Okay. The reason for my line of questioning, and this is just editorial content, is, we made an appropriation for a master plan, and, I think at some point there ought to be a formal delivery back of that master plan, right? Like,
I agree.
so, case in point, when we appropriate money for a master plan to the planning board, sooner or later, that will be brought back to town meeting for approval.
Right.
Right? Now, it's just a plan, it's a document, town meeting stamps it, and away it goes. This is a little bit different, I understand that, but I feel like there ought to be some, there ought to be some goods delivered for the expenditure. For whatever that's worth.
And this is me personally talking as a commissioner. I think when we're to the point that we've got a plan and a rough idea as to how we're going to implement it is the point where we'll probably go to the town and say, this is the result of that money being spent.
Okay, but at a time to be determined,
Right.
obviously. Okay, fair enough. Any other committee reports? Turns out a lot hasn't happened between last night and tonight, so. There were no minutes to review or vote on tonight, or I'd skip that anyway, so we are at public comment. Is there any public comment? Hearing and seeing none. Items for future meetings. This agenda has the April 14th tentative second public hearing on it. Again, TBD based on some of the issues that we touched upon tonight with respect to the warrant. Is there anything else pressing that we should be thinking about for the agenda for the 14th? I can't think of any, but
We talked about this briefly, was it yesterday, about the posting requirements for that 14th meeting. What's the deadline for you actually posting in a newspaper article?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm
Madam
just
Town
thinking.
Manager, do you happen to know?
So April 1.
Yeah. So we probably need to get that advertised next week. That's a good call.
By Friday.
You want me to follow up with you on that tomorrow, Heather? Good call. Getting down to it. All right.
Things tend to sneak up on committees and
Yeah. And I mean, we can advertise it and open it and close it,
Right.
if we don't need to do it. But I think it would be prudent based on our experiences over the last couple of years to do that. So, okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
so move.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Passios, a second from Mr. Waters. This will be a roll call vote because we have a member who is remote. Mr. Simeoni.
Aye.
Mr. Baelish.
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Mr. Passios.
Aye.
Mr. Gray.
Aye.
And I, for myself, we are adjourned. We will see everybody at 7 p.m. next Thursday, the 31st. Have a good night.